This is Dawn Must Follow Night by Hunter Danson. Part 1, Chapter 20. Read by the author. "What's happening?" Peter asked. He craned his head over the crowd, trying to get a glimpse of whatever was happening outside the keep. "It's Dindra," Kavar said. "They're here." "I thought they were here to help." Kavar did not answer. They were supposed to be allies, but the look on Meredith's face when he saw them told him that something was not right. He tried to think of something to tell his squad when Myriel, Dmitri, and Joff came through the inner gate. The instructors started ordering the students to the barracks. Kavar turned to follow, but Myriel caught him by the shoulder. "Not you, Kavar," the old librarian said. "Follow." Together they found the other squad leaders, and Myriel led them towards the watchtower. The old man moved fast, forcing Kavar to lengthen his stride. They reached the watchtower, and Kavar grew excited despite himself. Would they finally get to learn what was in the forbidden library? But the head librarian went down the stairs instead of up. Kavar hesitated and felt the other leaders bump into him. Myriel motioned with his hand and said, "Follow." They descended and reached the dungeon where Kavar had spent part of a moon. There were 3 cells aligned on the left wall. He recognized the middle one from his stay there. A dark lump in the middle of it moved and looked up. Kavar recognized him. He was dirty and half-conscious, but it was definitely him. Kavar turned to Myriel. "Is Albert the one who—" Myriel shoved a key into the lock of the adjacent cell with a loud clang. He threw open the door and motioned the students inside, locking it behind him, then pressed in a stone at the back of the cell. A door swung open. The leaders gawked as the librarian shepherded them through. The stone door swung shut behind them with a click and left them in the dark. The leaders gawked as the librarian shepherded them through. Then the stone door swung shut behind them with a click and left them in the dark. Kavar felt his heart beat faster while his eyes struggled to adjust. Where? He had time to think before the whoosh of a torch coming to life illuminated the tunnel. The walls were black. At first glance, Kavar thought they might be black glass. He'd seen the same material used for knives that needed to be sharper than steel. They had used one to remove the shrapnel from Yarek's leg, but something was wrong. There were no reflections. His mind tried to process the image his eyes were sending. If the walls were black glass, or any normal type of rock, there should have been a reflection. The flames should have been casting flickering shadows of Myriel and the students, but the walls were sucking up the light from the torch. Kavar looked down and felt dizzy. With no floor or walls or ceiling to focus on, he had the odd sensation that they were floating in an endless dark void. He started to lose his balance and extended a hand against the cave wall. He pulled it back with a cry. At first he thought it burned, but the adrenaline subsided and Kavar realized that the tips of his fingers were cold. "Be careful," Myriel warned them. Kavar glared at him. "Keep your eyes on the torch as much as possible. It's easy to get disoriented. Follow." Kavar cursed the old librarian not for the first time. They progressed a short way, and despite his frustration, Kavar did his best to follow the advice given. Even though he knew the walls were inches on either side, he could not shake the sensation that they were exposed in empty space. He fought his mind and tried to tell it in vain that he wasn't in danger of falling and floating off into the black, forgotten for eternity. The tunnel sloped down. Kavar was aware of twists and turns as they followed the librarian. He wasn't sure if they were going left or right, but it was always down. The old man was hunched, walking fast. Kavar almost cried out several times, "Where are you taking us? Why? What's happening?" But each time he opened his mouth, he stopped short. There was some presence, something alive here that did not want to be disturbed. Something old. They might have been in the tunnel for a few moments, or a few moons. It seemed the walls were not only sucking up the torchlight, but time as well. They turned corner to see a large steel door at the end of a long, straight section of tunnel. The floor dipped downwards, and it went out of view until they climbed a few more yards, emerging into a large cavern at least 20 feet in diameter. The door was on the far side, illuminated by 2 lamps on either side. It was unlike any door he had ever seen, and not just because it was floating in a dreamlike cavern. The entire construction was solid steel, and it was forged to match the curves and irregular edges of the tunnel. For the first time, Kavar was able to make out the shape of the walls, ceiling, and floor that surrounded him. He looked closer and noticed that where steel met black, as well as anywhere the steel was not a solid piece, there was a coating of thick yellow wax. A temperature and pressure gauge were mounted next to the handle. Kavar noticed that Myriel was careful to hold the torch far from the wax. This, the librarian motioned to the door, is the black chamber. That is where we will join with the black, Kavar asked. Myriel nodded. And one of you will not survive. The students looked at Myriel. It rewards a portion of power, but takes life with rampant greed. So wrote the 5th prelate of the Blades of Dawn, he explained. Shortly after, they attempted to join with the Black with 10 students, and only 3 lived. The Black, he motioned to the large steel door, always takes life. But, as the Blades have learned, at great cost, the life that it takes seems to increase exponentially with the amount of people in the chamber. The students were silent. Kavar knew that he was underground, but looking out into the dark room and down at his feet, he did not feel any claustrophobia. The blackness was so absorbing that he felt exposed, as if something or someone could fly out of the expanse on dark wings and snatch them away. Myriel picked a small bowl lamp hanging on the door and filled it with oil from his belt. He lit it and gave it to Isadora. And if we refuse? Gwen asked. Then you refuse. There is nothing I can do to stop you, though if you do, it could mean death for the realm. Gwen scoffed and looked around at the walls of the chamber. Myriel studied her and said, The first recorded ritual took place with 3 blades in the chamber. One of them died. They tried it with 4 the next time, and still 1 died. At 5, 2 died. When they tried with 10, Myriel frowned. Apparently the value of human life only goes so far with the Black. But this doesn't make any sense. Look around you, Gwen. The substance you are standing on is impervious to every mining and shaping technique the Blades have ever tried. This tunnel was not made, it was found. The Black breaks every rule we try to apply to it. The only laws it abides by are its own. Kavar looked at the door, then gazed into the darkness. If that is the price, then we must pay it, he said. Blades joined with the Black are necessary, are they not? Yes, Kavar, Myriel said. The power that the Black gives is the only way the Blades have ever been able to keep the beasts that come after a cataclysm under control. I tried to find a way so that you students wouldn't have to suffer the way we did. But no matter what angle I tried, I found no answers. His bony, scarred hands shook and his gray eyes dampened. Kavar touched his arm. It's okay. The librarian looked at him. Kavar glanced at the other students. Sloane and Isadora dipped their heads with understanding. Gwen was slower, but she did the same. Kavar looked back at Myriel. "It's our responsibility," he said. Myriel's eyes flicked to each student's face, then rested on Kavar. "I'm sorry." He turned and started melting the wax with his torch. When it was done, he grasped the steel handle and pulled. The door swung open without a sound. Kavar glanced at Myriel for the last time. The librarian only spoke the mantra of the blades. "Dawn must follow night." "Dawn must follow night," Kavar replied, leading the others into the small corridor. The door behind them closed, easing into the softened wax. The only source of light was the small oil lamp held by Isadora. The flame flickered but cast no shadows on the dark surface of the tunnel. They pressed forward. Kavar felt at that moment as if he was approaching a vast chasm. One misplaced step, one slip, and, well, how could anyone know what would happen? Thoughts flashed through his mind unbidden of what it might be like to fall over the edge, what it might be to feel the sensation of speed and wind rushing past until a final halt. Would it hurt? Would he even have time to feel the life leaving him? The outline of a door identical to the one they had left behind became visible. Their scuffling footsteps and rustling clothes receded into quick, excited breaths as they came to a stop in front of it. Kavar pulled a lever and air hissed out loud enough to startle them. The pressure gauge started creeping downwards, and they waited.